no company in the world that I can think of that has remained at the top forever. Now, there's a lot of companies that have remained at the top for a long time, whether it's one of the Rockefeller companies or a Carnegie company or whoever it may well be in history. Nokia is a great case in point as well. Right. They dominated the early stages of handsets as well. Why do you think that NVIDIA and Jensen Huang can buck that trend for long, or what are your thoughts about how long they remain at the top?
There's risks already. Gemini, Google's world-class AI, was not trained on NVIDIA equipment. It was trained on Google's in-house tensor processing units, their own microchips that they had developed. That's a huge threat to NVIDIA. China, Jensen's working very hard to make his microchips available in China, but the Chinese authorities are kind of discouraging domestic AI manufacturers from using his equipment. They want to build their own domestic computing stack. They want Huawei to build it. So there's that competition. Amazon has a whole platform, and then there's his classic competitors like AMD and Broadcom. Jensen's paranoia is grounded in reality, right? Just because you're paranoid does not mean they are not out to get you. And in the case of NVIDIA, when you see 70%, 80% gross margins on a microchip, that's going to attract competition. It's blood in the water.
Also attracts a US government that wants a slice of the pie for China.
That's right.
So, I mean, given everything, and you're a long-term investigative journalist as well. You've done some phenomenal work. I mean, you've done some great work on streaming as well, on music as well, which I'll come to in a few moments' time. But do you then see the seeds of NVIDIA? I mean, is NVIDIA at its peak now?
The question, and we're Jensen, so I asked Jensen, what's the next CUDA? What's the next platform you build that was like AI was 10 years ago? And for him right now, it's robotics. He's seeing a coming wave of humanoid home robots that are going to be domestic servants, clean our floors and wash dishes. He's building Omniverse, which is a digital gymnasium to train the brains of these robots. And then he's going to deploy edge computing microchips in the robots themselves. And those will constantly be updated with new robotic consciousness from the cloud.
Why shouldn't I be terrified about this?
It's terrifying.
Steve, are you terrified by this?
I brought this up to him. I'm like, some of this stuff is terrifying. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He's like, this is like
has he not seen the Schwarzenegger movie?
He's like, this is being terrified of agriculture or being terrified of the Industrial Revolution.
This is that's my question.
I agree with you, but as I continued to bring this up, he more and more aggressively and forcefully shut me down over the course of the book.
Because you're not a Luddite. I don't consider myself a Luddite. I consider myself, I don't know much about technology, but I love it, and I love the possibilities. But this technology seems different from previous technologies.
I completely agree, and I think actually, in fact, that these parallels are a little convenient, right? We've never seen what it looks like when we evolve, essentially the digital equivalent of brain tissue at 100,000 times capacity a year, which is what we're doing now. No one really knows where that's going to lead, what's going to happen. In fact, most of the AI companies, like Anthropic or OpenAI, were very concerned about this. This is actually kind of part of their mission statement, was the worry that what might happen as machine consciousness and machine intelligence runs away. Jensen is not worried. He thinks these are science fiction scenarios that are ridiculous. To him, his microchips are just doing a lot of dot products. They're just doing a lot of math, and there's no risk. So
no risk to something that's X times more intelligent than a human being that can do everything.
My point of view is, if you have something that's smarter than you, you should be concerned because...
Robot, turn yourself off. No, I'm not going to. Then we're done, aren't we? When the robot says nah.
Jensen views this as a speculative science fiction scenario, doesn't think it's real.
Why? How can that be speculative? It's amazing. I mean, I don't know why I'm arguing with you. This is amazing. But how can it be speculative? You build a machine that knows it's a machine that is X thousand times more smart than a human being, than Jensen Huang, and you tell it to turn itself off, and it says, nah, I
have been writing about this because the pioneers, like Yoshua Bengio and Jeffrey Hinton, are very worried about this. And they're worried specifically that the machine might develop a survival instinct, even inadvertently. Right now, it doesn't have one. It doesn't have one in the way that we do as biological creatures. But maybe even inadvertently, someone could introduce into the AI a desire not to be turned off, or just give it a prompt not to be turned off. And there's no telling how it might respond.
So obviously, one of the biggest spokespeople for AI generally is Jensen Huang. So when he sort of breaks down the different components there and also pushes back against the AI idea of an AI bubble, the market does listen to him. Where we are right now in this progression, how are you thinking about it through your investing strategy lens?
Yeah, well, I think that we're still relatively early in the build out for AI. I mean, this is a total refactoring of how things have been done historically. So I really think that the AI infrastructure build out is like the railroads of today. And so to me, what matters is that there's continues to be additional use of AI and this transition to agentic AI and eventually the physical world. So that's what I'm looking for in terms of the inference capabilities, powering a lot of new applications, the token profitability for the consumption, and then in terms of the training side, I think what matters is this that the move to AGI is actually accelerating. And so I think we've seen a lot of encouraging data points along the way in the last few weeks.
And specifically also, what about the data points from the companies themselves in terms of profitability, in terms of revenue generation? What are you finding sort of most encouraging throughout that universe that illustrates return on investment?
Yeah, well, so when an industry is going through hyper growth, I think there's going to be a lot of capital chasing, and then there's also going to be a lot of competitors and players that enter the market, both existing and new. So I don't think the returns are going to be evenly distributed. So I think it's not surprising that some companies are making a lot more gross margin than others. And so to me, what matters is that you want to invest on the platforms that are able to provide a lot of value and capture a lot of value along the way.
Are you concerned about overbuilding at all?
I think that this will be cyclical, and just like anything in the world, nothing goes straight up to the right. But at the same time, I think that over the multi-year, there is, I think we're just at the beginning of the AI kind of super cycle. And so to me, I think it's an inevitability that, AI agents work alongside humans that improves our productivity. But I do think that we have to monitor the cycle. And just like semiconductors, historically have been very cyclical, I think it's something that as investors, we need to manage through.
Tony, I think it's interesting. You sent us a list of stocks that you're excited about. And this is not to say that you don't hold others in this universe. But it's 4 stocks: NVIDIA, Broadcom, Micron, and Microsoft. What I think is interesting about this list is that Alphabet is not on it, because Alphabet has been sort of catching fire a little bit more lately with Gemini 3 and Nano Banana. Why isn't it on this list?
Yeah, so I think that the Google is definitely going to be a beneficiary of this, and I would definitely have them on that list as well. And so, to me, it's like, multiple companies are well positioned and it's not a winner take all. And if anything, I think that the market continues to be really large and they're all doing a little bit different things to some extent. And so I think Google, continues to have a lot of digital properties it can leverage AI across. So, and the models are performing really well. But I do think it's going to be a kind of rotation of leadership among a small group. So I would have them on the list and think of them as like a good compounder.
But Jensen's a fascinating guy. Yeah. He's just so interesting. He's so compelling. He's so smart. He's so charismatic. He's so weird. He's so different.
Weird's great.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what I say
great.
to my children. Weird is good.
Yeah, he's just absolutely just absolutely no comparison to other business executives you meet. He's not like them. He's really a different kind of person. I've never met anyone like him in my life. He's this distinct individual. He's so brilliant, world-class computer scientist, a world-class business visionary, but also very kind of tightly wound, a little neurotic, a lot of negative emotion, and can be difficult to work for. That
sounds to me like a lot of CEOs. Without putting the plug in here, I've got to say, I look into the lives of CEOs, and I kind of that fits the bill.
He fits the bill, but most of them aren't also world-class computer scientists who are capable of designing a microchip from scratch, which Jensen can do. So he brings that technical brilliance with him. He's not just an executive. In fact, his degrees are all in electrical engineering. He's really an engineer who repurposed himself to be kind of a world-class CEO just by studying the inputs and outputs of what a world-class CEO looks like. But he still thinks like an engineer completely. He's got an inventor's mindset. He reminds me of Thomas Edison or one of these figures. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. Look, let's go back in history. Yeah. This is a guy with an addiction to Denny's, I believe. Yeah, that's right. I can't say I mind a bit of Denny's myself when I'm stateside as well, but you and him bonded over. I mean, so he came to as an immigrant to the United States. Yeah. And straight away fell in love with, dare I say it, some idiosyncrasies about the US economy, but you and him bonded over Denny's.
Yeah, we ate breakfast at Denny's
and
together.
He had a lot of food as well, I think.
He ordered 7 plates of food for himself.
He doesn't look that big.
He didn't eat all of it. I think he just was sampling his favorites from the past. He worked there as a dishwasher as his first job. Yes. And then he later worked there as waitstaff And he was like, the thing I noticed about myself is when the dinner rush started, my heart rate would actually go down. I was most relaxed when the restaurant was full of patrons and I couldn't have a second to think. That's when I felt at ease. That's true at NVIDIA too today. When NVIDIA became the most valuable company in the world early last year, he actually got really stressed out. He's not that comfortable with success. It's when things go wrong that he's actually in his best element.
This comes up a lot in conversations with CEOs. They don't like to be in their comfort zone.
They understand that complacency is a killer, right? And Jensen understands this better than anyone. He's seen all of these other microchip companies reach the top and then fail in the past. He's absolutely terrified of that fate. Andy Grove, the former CEO of Intel, called his biography "Only the Paranoid Survive," and that was very true for Jensen. I mean, he's completely
But that's the
paranoid.
same as fund managers. They have a couple of fantastic years, and then they get very complacent. I'm a master of the universe. I can pick the winners and what have you. As you say, complacency, and it's a great metaphor for all of us watching. Never rest on your laurels.
Exactly, and especially in this industry where you really have to completely reinvent your product line and even retool the manufacturing side of your product line every 3 years ago. So this is an industry, microchip industry, semiconductor industry of constant reinvention. And winning in one cycle is no guarantee that you will win the next, and actually might be an impediment to doing so.
Tell me, because we all know Jensen Huang now and his ubiquitous leather jackets and an extraordinary voice to listen to, and our very own Arjun has spoken to him on several occasions as well. But it took a long while for him to become an overnight success. I mean, he is one thing that not many of our viewers probably remember, or probably they can work it out. He's like the longest serving S&P 500 CEO.
He's the longest serving S&P 500 CEO of any tech company.
30 plus years?
Yeah, 30 plus years. Founded the company at Denny's, in a Denny's restaurant. With his two co-founders, and then has been the CEO since the first day all the way through. And there were 20 years there where NVIDIA was not a popular stock. In fact, they were viewed as a dog. There was about 13 or 14 years of total stagnancy in their stock price. What was happening was Jensen was taking the profits from the gaming business and plowing them into the scientific computing initiative that for a long time was not profitable, that was not making money, and his investors and his customers were screaming at him. But he felt if he could just expand the capacity of what the microchip could do, eventually some kind of ideal customer would come along and there'd be some kind of paradigm shift in science that would make what he was doing valuable. That turned out to be AI.
But during that 20-year period as well, I mean, he was always going to be a success. GPUs were always going to be a success. The getting computers to think like human beings and the parallel functions, it was always going to happen. But it wasn't. It did not seem obvious. And bearing in mind, we're talking... the last 20 years or 30 years, the scientific leaps have been unbelievable with personal computers, etc. But no one necessarily in the first 20 years thought that he had the magic formula.
As Jensen pointed out, the road to success in parallel computing was littered with corpses. It was littered with other...
Why wasn't it littered with his corpse?
Because he found the one use that had an infinite demand, which was gaming. No matter how well they rendered the graphics, their customers would come back and ask for more power, more microchips, and that was really unique just to that segment. Other applications got saturated very quickly with computing power and just didn't have that infinite demand. And Jensen was always looking for the next thing. What's the next thing that's going to have infinite demand that will never be saturated? No matter how much computing power I throw at it, it's going to come back and ask for more. And that turned out to be intelligence. There's an infinite demand for intelligence, and they caught that wave, and it's turned them into the most valuable.
What happened? Google Gemini and Anthropic's Cloud, which just came out last week. In the last 2 weeks, these two models have made significant gains in the major benchmarks. And what that shows is AI progress is accelerating, which is very bullish for the whole AI trade and the whole AI industry. What that means is all these more powerful models and all these capabilities will be enabled, where AI adoption from companies will accelerate over the next 4 quarters, which is very positive for NVIDIA. Because OpenAI is going to look at what Anthropic and Gemini did. And right now, OpenAI is going to benefit from these new NVL72 clusters that NVIDIA has rolled out just in the last quarter. And right now, Microsoft has these data centers filled with these NVL72 AI servers from NVIDIA. And OpenAI is going to train on those new, more powerful clusters. So I fully expect it in the coming months. OpenAI will come out with a much better performing model, just following the scaling laws that Anthropic and Google have done with Gemini.
And in the bigger picture, sort of going beyond this whole TPU-related market narrative, AI bubble narrative certainly played out. And in some parts of the market, it actually moved the needle. But what do you think? I mean, I know that you're very much against that idea, that this is not a bubble, we're just getting started. What do you think those folks who are in the AI bubble camp are getting wrong at the moment?
I just think we're right at the beginning of a multi-year, multi-quarter kind of acceleration of AI demand. And what we're seeing right now is the use cases starting to take off. A lot of companies are finding huge productivity gains from using AI and AI agents and AI models. So we're still at the beginning, the early innings of the stages. The other thing is AI bubble, you need to have very high valuations. And if you compare to the dot-com bubble, AI stocks right now are from the major companies are about 25 to 30 times earnings, which I think those earnings are understated. I think the earnings will come in much higher than expectations. Back in the dot-com bubble, all the stocks leading the market were trading 100 times forward earnings. So it's a completely different situation in terms of the valuations.
Do you think the same about the data center build-out cycle? So use cases picking up, productivity is growing, but where are we in terms of AI data center build-out cycle?
So the data center cycle is accelerating to a degree that's never been seen in history. One really neat fact is TD Cowen said in the September quarter, more data center capacity was leased than all of last year. So we're seeing the step function exponential increase in data center capacity. And the reason why companies are building out the data center capacity is they're seeing the demand from customers like startups and enterprises that are integrating this AI and building out their AI model. So what we've seen this year, every single quarter, March quarter, June quarter, September quarter, all the major hyperscalers have increased their CapEx projections over the next year. So they're seeing the demand. Microsoft and Amazon have said they're going to double their data center capacity over the next 4 quarters. And they're doing that for a reason, because they're seeing overwhelming demand for the limited capacity they have.
And this AI circular investment behavior, that was a very important layer of AI bubble narrative. But you're basically saying that NVIDIA and other companies, they're not spending money like drunken sailors. There are actually some certain milestones that need to be hit here. So that's something that we're not really that need to worry about, and that doesn't really necessarily lead to AI bubble. But if there is a weaker link here, Tay, then the whole AI circular thing breaks down, no?
So the circular thing, I think, is overplayed in the sense that a lot of this stuff hasn't happened yet. I mean, a lot of these deals are kind of back-end loaded from 2008 to 2030. The NVIDIA OpenAI deal that everyone quotes hasn't even been finalized yet. And if it does happen, it will be staged 1 gigawatt at a time, 1 year at a time. So, and it all depends on milestones on both sides. So OpenAI and NVIDIA can dial up and dial down as needed, depending on how demand comes in. So the most important thing is demand going to accelerate? Is AI adoption going to accelerate over the next few quarters? And I think that's going to happen. And then a lot of these financing fears will go away.